Namaskaromi, swagatam sarvebhyah. Well, we're back once again for another unit in our exciting journey through the Sanskrit language. Now that we've learned a little bit about Sanskrit grammar, right? We've talked about how nominals work and how they get declined. Now it's time to look at what you can call Sanskrit syntax, which means the various ways that sentences are arranged and put together. In this series of videos, what we're going to do is to cover a handful of different particles and connectors, indeclinables, question markers, and other techniques through which phrases and clauses are strung together to create sort of more and more complicated types of utterances in the Sanskrit language. So we're going to move from very basic declarative sentences into more complicated things like asking questions, creating relative and correlative clauses, if-then statements, indefinites, and negative absolutes. There's going to be other little tidbits that are going to be interspersed here and there in the videos, so there's going to be lots of interesting and cool things to learn in store. And what you'll end up being able to do is take a kind of leap from being able to say just simple sentences like the elephant eats the fruit to more complicated constructions like, I don't know, whenever the elephant goes to the forest, he eats fruit. Or the elephant who is going to the forest is the one who is eating the fruit. Or if the elephant goes to the forest, then he eats the fruit. You also are going to be able to now ask questions like, did the elephant eat the fruit in the forest? Or who ate the fruit in the forest? Where did the elephant eat the fruit? All kinds of things like that. Before we get into it all, though, I wanted to start by going back to something we just sort of glossed over when we were looking at nouns, which is how to construct verbs. We talked about how verbs are like plants, if you remember, right? They start with verb roots, like the root gum for go, bu to become, kad or da, right? Eat, give. Then they turn into stems, gacha, bhava, kada, dada, right? And then to the stems are added various endings like the leaves, right? Let's dig into what these endings are and which ones are added to the stems to form what we call the present indicative tense. The Panini called this the lat. So first of all, we should remember that the verb endings have to agree in person and number, purusha and vachana, with whatever noun or pronoun is in the nominative in the sentence, in the first case, right? This is the agent who's doing the action of the verb. The agent will agree with the verb. In Sanskrit, the persons are called purushas. There's prathama purusha, which corresponds to the third person in English. He, she, it, they, them. Then there's madhyama purusha, which corresponds to the second person in English, meaning you. And then there's uttama purusha, which is the first person, meaning I or we. So it's if Rama is the one who's going to the forest, the verb ending is going to be the third person singular. Ramaha gacchati. Prathama purusha ekavachana. If Rama and Sita are going together, then it's going to be third person dual now, right? Dvivachana. Ramaha sitacha gacchataha. If I'm the one who's going, then the verb will take on the first person singular ending, uttama purusha ekavachana, and it's going to be aham gacchami. If you and me, we are both going together, then it's going to be avam gacchavaha. And if we are all going, including our 3 or more friends and family, then it becomes vayam sarve gacchamaha. We are all going. These are each considered the uttama purusha. First you have the ekavachana, the singular, the dvivachana, the dual, the bahuvachana, the plural. Aside from person, aside from number, there's one other property that all verbs have. It's a tricky one to remember for new learners, and it's called the voice. There are all kinds of subtleties about the meaning that comes with voice, and we'll talk about it later on down the road when we start conjugating verbs. For now, though, just keep in mind that in Sanskrit, voice means that there's kind of 2 different sets of endings that are going to get attached to the verbs. The first set are called the Parasmaipada. And the second set is called the Ātmanepada. In some ways, there's no real strict distinction of meaning between these two. For now, again, it's just best to consider that the two different types of endings are basically like a property of the verbs. Some verb roots will take the Parasmaipada, some verb roots are going to take the Ātmanepada, and then there's some roots that can have both. Which verb takes which endings, you just kind of have to learn them along with the verbs. So that's why when we learn verbs, we're going to learn them in their Prathama Purusha Ekavachana form, their third person singular. We're learning Gachati, Vadati, Aste, Bhashate. That tells you which endings they're going to take on. Parasmaipada verbs are ones that like Khadati or Vadati or Gachati. These are three examples. These all have the ti ending for the third person singular that you can notice. Ātmanepada verbs are ones like Aste, which means sits, Manyate, thinks, Bhashate, speaks. These have the te ending, which is for the third person singular. Getting a sense of which endings to use for which verbs is going to take some practice. You'll make mistakes again. But for now, try to remember that verbs are formed when there's a root. It's turned into the present indicative stem, which is called the lat. And then you add either Parasmaipada endings or Ātmanepada endings, like leaves and flowers on the tree. These endings have to match the subject of the sentence, which is going to be in the nominative. And the matching is going to happen in terms of the person and the number, the Purusha and Vachana. So, what are some examples of this? For the Parasmaipada, we can work with these three verbs: Gachati, Khadati, Karoti. This would mean he, she, or it goes, he, she, or it eats, he, she, or it does. Karoti. They're based on the three verb roots: gam, khad, kr. To go, to eat, to do, or make. On the Ātmanepada side of things, let's take bhashate, manyate, kurute from the roots bhash, man, meaning speaks and thinks, and then kurute. So for the third person, prathama purusha, we're going to get gam, gachati, gachataha, gachanti. She, he, it goes. The two of them are going. All of them are going. For khadati, we'll get an example. We can have gajaha khadati, the elephant eats. Ganye khadataha, the two girls are eating. Vanaraha khadanti, the monkeys, three or more, are eating. For karoti, we'll have balakaha karoti, the boy does. Bharye kurutaha, the two wives are doing something. Chatraha kurvanti, the students are doing something, three or more. The second person, the madhyama purusha, will have tvam gachasi, yuam gachataha, and yuyam gachatha. You go, you two go, and you all go. For khadati, it's going to be khada si, khada taha, khada tha. By the way, we should note that you'll often see the pronoun itself is going to be dropped since the person and number are embedded in the verb ending itself. So if you say palani khada taha, we already know that we're talking about the two of you eating the three or more fruits. You don't have to say yuam, unless you really want to emphasize and clarify who's doing the eating. It doesn't matter. We already know, right? Lastly, for karoti, we'll have tvam karoshi, kurutha, and kurutha. You do, you two do, and you all are doing. For uttama purusha, the first person, we're going to have aham gacchami, avam gacchavaha, and vayam gacchamaha. I am going, we two are going, we both are going, and we all are going, three or more of us. For khadati, khad, it's going to be khadami, khadavaha, khadamaha. I eat, we two eat, we all eat. For karoti, we're going to have karomi, I am doing, kurmaha, kurvaha, the two of us are doing, and kurmaha, the three or more of us are doing or making something. Switching finally to Ātmanepada, let's take bhashate, to speak. For prathama purusha, we'll get Ramaha bhashate. Rama is talking. Ramaha sitacha bhashete. Rama and Sita both are talking. Or Nrupaha bhashante. The three or more kings are talking. For the root man, meaning think, we'll have samanyate, she thinks. Te manyete, the two of them think. Te manyante, the three or more of them think. For second person, we'll have tvam manyase, you are thinking. Yuvam manyete, the two of you are thinking. And yuyam manyadohe, you all are thinking. That was hard to remember for me. Finally, for the first person, we'll have aham manye, I think. Awam manyawahe, and wayam manyamahe, we think, three or more. So these are the Parasmaipada and Ātmanepada endings for the different types of verbs. We're just at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to learning how verbs work. Eventually, we're going to kind of dig down, drill down, and you're going to get way more information than you ever even really hoped to learn about verbs. But for now, as we start making Sanskrit sentences and complexifying our knowledge of how sentences work, just to keep in mind that the active verb is going to agree in person and number with whatever word is in the nominative in the sentence. The other thing to keep in mind is that you have to look up if the verb is going to take the Parasmaipada or Ātmanepada endings and then use those instead of the other. Right? And like always, the more that you practice, the more that you learn these verbs, the easier it's all going to become because you'll be able to tell what sounds right and what doesn't sound right. So once you're feeling a little bit good about verb endings, feel like you have them down pat or at least familiar with most of them, let's now move on to look at a few different types of indeclinable particles that litter our Sanskrit sentences in our next segment. Till then, thank you for watching. Punarmilamaha. Dhanyavadaha.